A few weeks ago, the guy who stole $72 million worth of Bitcoin back in 2016 was released from prison. He was sentenced to serve 5 years, but he got out after only serving 14 months. His wife, who helped him launder the money, was also released a few months ago. You might have heard about these two if you watched a documentary on Netflix called Biggest Heist Ever. If not, I suggest you go check it out. You'll see just how different this couple is. Ilya Lichtenstein was an entrepreneur and an investor, and his wife, Heather Morgan, had a more interesting career. She was a Forbes contributor. She published blogs about cybersecurity and protecting your business, which is ironic, I know, but that's not the interesting part. What's more interesting is her rap career. She's actually a prolific rapper that goes by the name of Razzlekhan, the Turkish Martha Stewart, and she calls herself the Crocodile of Wall Street. You can go check her out on YouTube. She has a bunch of music videos. Okay, but what I actually want to talk about is how the hack went down. How did this company manage to lose nearly 120,000 Bitcoin, which is roughly about $10 billion today? And then how did law enforcement manage to catch the Bonnie and Clyde of crypto 5.5 years later? But first, let me share some context on Bitfinex. It's a crypto exchange based out of Hong Kong, but the company is registered in the British Virgin Islands. Back in 2016, it was one of the major platforms where people bought, sold, and stored Bitcoin. You can think of it like a brokerage where you deposit funds, trade, and they hold your assets. Bitfinex had partnered with a company called BitGo to implement a multi-signature wallet. And this is where we're going to get into the weeds a little bit because I need to explain how it was supposed to work in order for you to understand why it failed. Multi-sig means multiple private keys are required to authorize a transaction. So the idea is that no single party can unilaterally move funds. Even if one key gets compromised, the hacker can't do anything without the others. This is what we call defense in depth. In theory, BitGo was supposed to be a check on Bitfinex. When Bitfinex initiated a withdrawal, they'd sign with one of their keys and send over the transaction to BitGo. BitGo would review it, apply their security policies like withdrawal limits and velocity checks, and they'd flag anything unusual. And if everything looked good, they'd co-sign with their key and the transaction would go through. The security model assumed that Bitfinex's keys would be properly isolated, one online for operations and one offline in cold storage. That way, even if a hacker got into Bitfinex's systems, they'd only get one key. They'd still need BitGo to sign off, and BitGo would catch anything suspicious. But ultimately, that's not what happened. In August 2016, Ilya Lichtenstein got into Bitfinex's systems. We don't know exactly how he got in. It could have been a credential compromise or some server vulnerability. But once he was in, he found what he needed. There was a report from a firm called Ledger Labs, and it showed that Bitfinex had some serious configuration problems. They stored multiple keys and security tokens on the same device. So because Bitfinex held on to 2 keys, when Ilya got access, he could initiate transactions and sign them on Bitfinex's behalf. Remember, Bitfinex held 2 of the 3 keys. They were supposed to keep them separate, but they stored them on the same device. So once Ilya got in, he had access to both of those keys. That's 2 of the 3. So he didn't need to go to BitGo at all. BitGo later said that their systems weren't breached and that the software functioned correctly. And that's true. But it also didn't matter. The whole point of bringing in a third party is to prevent a single point of failure. Bitfinex created that point of failure by keeping both keys in the same place. Within 3 hours, Ilya pushed through more than 2,000 transactions, and he drained 119,756 Bitcoins from user wallets into a single address that he controlled. So in 3 hours, he made $72 million. And then he cleaned up after himself. He deleted access controls, wiped log files, and anything that could be traced back to him. Bitcoin's price dropped 20% almost immediately after the news broke. Ilya waited 5 months before touching a dime of it. In early 2017, he started moving small amounts to Alphabay, which was one of the largest darknet marketplaces at the time. From Alphabet, the Bitcoin moved through a series of exchanges and got converted into coins. This technique is called chain hopping. You convert to Bitcoin and then Monero, and then from Monero, you transfer to Ethereum, Ethereum to something else. Each hop makes the trail harder to follow because you're jumping between blockchains with different transparency levels. Monero is particularly useful here because it's built for privacy. It obscures the sender and receiver and the amount by default using ring signatures and stealth addresses. So once you hop into Monero and then back out, you've created a real problem for anyone trying to trace you. That public ledger advantage that Bitcoin gives investigations is gone from that segment of the trail. After chain hopping, Ilya moved the funds through mixing services. These are also called tumblers. Bitcoin Fog was one of the biggest mixers at the time, and Ilya used them a lot. The way mixers work is you deposit your Bitcoin, and it gets pooled with everyone else's Bitcoin, and you get back the same amount minus a fee. But now there's no direct on-chain link between your input address and the output address. Think of it like walking into a casino with marked bills, converting to chips, and then playing for a while, and then cashing out. The bills you walk out with aren't the bills you walked in with. That's essentially what mixing does for Bitcoin. But these darknet markets were just one channel that Ilya used. He also set up shell companies to move money into traditional banking. Some funds got converted to gold coins, gift cards, NFTs. He even used it for little stuff like Uber rides and a PlayStation. The goal was to create as much distance as possible between the stolen Bitcoin and the usable money through as many layers as he could. But here's the fundamental challenge with laundering crypto. The blockchain is a public ledger. Every transaction is recorded permanently. Investigators can literally watch the money move. The hard part isn't seeing it, it's attributing it to who it belongs to. It's difficult to connect wallet address to a real human being. And for 6 years, they couldn't make that connection. Bitfinex hired investigators. The FBI, IRS, and Homeland Security all ran parallel investigations. Real quick note on the IRS. Their criminal investigation unit has quietly become one of the best in the world at blockchain forensics. The lead investigator on this case was Chris Janzuski, who basically built his reputation tracing crypto through Silk Road and the Alphabet takedowns. He's at TRM Labs now. But back to the investigation, investigators, they could see the money moving, and they could map out the chain hopping and identify when funds pass through mixers. But the mixers work pretty efficiently. So the transaction web was broken in enough places that they couldn't definitively tie it to a person. So with that being said, how did they eventually crack the case? It was a combination of things. Remember how I said the funds went through Alphabet in early 2017? Well, a few months later, in July of 2017, the FBI led an international takedown of Alphabet. When they seized the marketplace, they got access to its transactions. That let investigators trace the stolen Bitfinex funds through Alphabet and then out the other side to exchange accounts that included one registered to Ilya. But they needed more to build a case. Later on, investigators traced Bitcoin from a wallet cluster connected to the hack to an exchange that sells prepaid gift cards. A $500 Walmart gift card was purchased and sent to a Russian email address. But the transaction came from an IP address tied to a cloud provider in New York. That IP address was linked to Ilya. Portions of that gift card was redeemed by Heather Morgan. That $500 Walmart gift card was used to make online purchases, and those purchases were delivered straight to their Wall Street apartment. That gave investigators probable cause. When they searched his laptop, they found a spreadsheet with over 2,000 wallet addresses and the private keys. This was his master list for the entire operation. In February 2022, the federal agents arrested the couple in Manhattan. Ilya was looking at 20 years behind bars, but he got that sentence dropped down to 5 because he flipped on Roman Sterlingov. This is the guy that was running Bitcoin Fog, the mixing service. Ilya's testimony put Sterlingov away for 12 and a half years. So the feds got a bigger fish, and Ilya got his sentence dropped dramatically down. A lot of people still think that crypto is untraceable. That was never really accurate, but it's definitely not true now. Every Bitcoin transaction is recorded on the public ledger. The hard part was always about linking wallet addresses to the real people that owned them. And that's the part that really changed. Companies like Chain Analysis and TRM Labs have spent years building tools that can follow funds through different mixers and track chain hopping across different blockchains. They can now connect the dots back to real identities. Law enforcement uses this stuff every day now. The Bitfinex hack was a proof of concept. They traced the funds through Alphabay and through mixers, through privacy coins, and eventually to a couple's apartment in Manhattan. Remember, the blockchain is forever. Protect your keys, protect your coins, and don't get got.